hypnotherapy?
Well, in a sense. So how I got into it was I was selling real estate, and I was very, very stressed out at the time. This was, again, 17 years ago. And I got lockjaw in my jaw, and you may have heard me share this story, but it was very, very painful. I couldn't open my mouth for 5 days. And it was stress-related. I was stressed out. I was in an unhappy marriage, and I was working my butt off and trying to do all the right things to, live in the nice house and have all the things that I thought I wanted at the time that were, very important to me at that time. And I got lockjaw, and somebody told me to go to a hypnotherapist, and I thought it was wacky and weird. So I went to a dentist, and they sent me to an orthopedic surgeon. They wanted to break my jaw and build me a mouthpiece. Well, I didn't really like the idea of all that, so I went back to this.
I can appreciate that.
Yeah, and especially being in sales, right? I'm like, I'm going to walk around with a mouthpiece, right? So I went back to this woman, and I was like, what the heck? I'll go try this hypnosis thing. And honestly, I was very, very skeptical. I thought it was weird. I thought it was hokey. I wasn't very receptive. But when I went and sat down with this woman and, she said, close your eyes, and she started talking to me, it was so relaxing, and it felt great. And then when we got done, about an hour later, she goes, Kathy, go ahead and open your eyes and open your mouth. And I opened my eyes, and my mouth popped open. And, yeah, it blew me away. I was like, are you kidding me? Like, they wanted to do all this surgery. I've never had it since either, and I had a pretty severe case of TMJ. So bottom line to me for that was I drove home that night, and I just started really reflecting on what I was doing to myself. And this was before the law of attraction and before The Secret, and people were not having those conversations 17 years ago.
Right.
So I felt a little loopy and weird that I was going to see this hypnosis lady. And, I called her the next day, and I said, I don't know what you did to me, but I want more of it. That was a really cool thing. So I started seeing her every week, Eric, and within about a 6-month time frame, my business more than doubled. And I wasn't going to see her for business. I was working on myself. I was working on my beliefs about myself. And I didn't even know that at the time. I just kind of went to her and said, I really like the way that feels, and do it more. It's very cool stuff. So after I worked with her for quite a while, I went and did an internship underneath her where I had to then hypnotize 200 people before she would certify me. So I started going to my fellow agents and people in my community and saying, hey, I got to do an internship. Can you come to my house?
Right.
And they would come to my house at night, and I would do these sessions and go back to her. And long and short of it all is I had a private practice for 10 years, and I'd say 85% of my clients were real estate agents because I knew the stress. I knew what it was like to make a ton of money and then not make money and go bang on doors. And, again,
right.
The Internet wasn't even around when I started in real estate. It was the crisscross guide where we sat and, cold called out of a blue book. So,
oh, you're telling your age, Kathy.
I know. But, that's the beauty of it, though, is, I did it, and I understand it. And I, as a result of me really going more within versus all the outer stuff, it changed my life. It changed my world. It changed my income. It changed everything about how I operated in business and how I responded to circumstances going on around me. I really learned that it's not about the situation and the circumstances outside of me. It's how I think and create and respond to the world.
Well, Kathy, since it had such an impact on you, why didn't you just stay with real estate? You doubled your production, and, you were in the business to make money, I assume. Or did you find some greater sense of fulfillment?
Oh, way more fulfillment. I think that all people are in business, especially entrepreneurs, because that's what realtors are. Especially, when we're out to do what we do, we want to make the money and we want the freedom. Right. However, I had a lot of freedom and not enough money, and then I started making more money. But what I found was my heart and my passion was in teaching people what I learned to make their life work better. So I think when you truly do what your passion is and you don't just work for the money, your life is limitless. You can't put a price tag on. On the fulfillment and the emotional richness and life that I've had since I left real estate, and I've been able to speak all around the nation and be in these films, and I've helped thousands of people. I've helped people not go commit suicide. I've helped people double and triple and quadruple their income. I've helped people in the hospital dying of cancer, get a completely new sense of themselves. I can't put a price tag on following my passion, and you know what I'm saying? So real estate was an easy market for me to niche myself into because I understood it. But I do speak to several other audiences. But I think anybody that knows real estate and that's been in real estate, it's almost like it's in your blood. You always end up going back to it at some level.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Well, I think it's really interesting in your story that, you went to this hypnotherapist because of your locked jaw,
yes.
and then you continue to go to her because of the changes you wanted to make internally, not necessarily go to her to learn how to increase production or sales, but the unintended consequence was that you were even more successful because you were able to deal with those inner issues and stress in your life. And I wonder, is that really the challenge for most people who are looking, externally? Maybe they feel they need perhaps a better marketing program, or they need more assistance, or they need a better they need a faster computer, or they need a new asset or a new asset manager relationship, or they need something externally, and they never really look at maybe what's going on inside.
It's precisely why. And you're hitting such a good point, because I want to explain this to people since there's not a visual aid, but I want people to understand this. So you've seen me do this before, Eric, and I talked about it on the last call because we did a webinar on the last one. But for those of you that are listening, if you draw a circle, if you can draw, if you're driving and you can't, just imagine a circle about the size of an apple. If you were to take 5 to 10% of that circle, that 5 to 10% of your mind is your conscious, logical, practical part of your mind. That's where we speak to ourselves at up to 500 words a minute, and that's where we live all day long. We're conscious, we're practical, we're thinking, we're doing, we're going, and that little internal voice is just going constantly, and people just stay so busy that, they're busy being busy, so to speak. The other 90% of our mind is our subconscious mind, and our subconscious mind is beating our heart right now. It's flowing our blood. It's blinking our eyes. It's constantly working, and our subconscious mind is conditioned. Up to 80% of who we are is conditioned by the time we're 8 years old. So when I'm doing this visually, in that 90%, I put a bunch of little pluses and minuses in there, and I say, from the ages of 0 to 8, 80% of you and your core beliefs around the world and yourself and everything are developed. So as we get older into our adult life, our conscious mind, most speakers and motivational people and books, they're all talking about, what you think you create. I honestly, I agree to a point in that, but I also know that what we create is how we unconsciously feel about ourselves. So you can think all day long about being a multimillionaire. You can write affirmations. You can be a positive person, but still at the subconscious level of your mind not feel good enough, not feel worthy, not feel deserving. And if you do the math, 90% or 5 to 10, I promise you the subconscious mind always wins. So when I'm talking to people and they come to me and they go, Kathy, I've tried everything, I've done this, I get it. Because you've been trying to do it consciously and logically. You've set out the intention, maybe you've set the goal, which is fabulous. I tell people, keep doing what you're doing. Don't stop doing that. I'm a life learner. Intention and goals, all that's great stuff. However, when you learn how to access the within, the subconscious mind, and you ask yourself, where do you think your thoughts come from? And if people think about that, your thoughts come from your core beliefs about the world, about money, about success, about your business. So when you start to identify, when I help people start to identify, I should say, your limiting beliefs about things, what's stopping them, what's blocking them. So for instance, I could take a salesperson and, start talking to them about their wealth consciousness, right? And ask them, what is it that you constantly say about money? What is it that you feel about it every time you go to spend it? What do you feel about your business? Do you walk around and say, oh, it's so hard, the market's this, that? What are you repetitively thinking and feeling? I promise you that's producing the results that you're getting.
So that's how we know what we're thinking within our subconscious mind. It's identifying the things that just consistently play in our heads.
Yes. Because that
we never verbalize those things. They just play in our heads, or do we verbalize those things?
We don't. We don't walk up to somebody and introduce ourselves and say, "Hey, Eric, my name's Kathy, and I grew up not feeling good enough."
Well, good to meet you, Gabby.
Yeah, exactly. But that was mine. That was a core belief of mine. And so people either overcompensate, right, to try to look good and try to be good and try to be successful, but then a lot of times still have that empty feeling. But I want to really speak to the sales arena and why this entrepreneurial sales thing is so passionate to me. First of all, when we're in sales, we do a lot of work, especially realtors. We do a lot of work up front without getting paid, right? So
right.
We set out, we get a client, we get a lead, we get a referral, we make the phone call, we build the rapport, which realtors, typically salespeople, are fabulous at rapport building. They love people. It's why they're in the business. They're great people. The top producers have the systems. They have the strategies around them to support success. That's why they're successful. Their perception of themselves is already successful. The other agents, the other 80% of agents out there, if you will, that are wanting to be successful and that struggle and that don't seem to ever get to that level, when you look at the dynamic of a sales, it's the rapport, then they move into the content, right? They got to know the market. They got to know the paperwork. I mean, there's so much information for people to know today. It's a lot. And
right.
that the market's always changing, right? So that's what most of their day is focused on. And then you get to the point where you need to do the transaction, and then you're moving into escrow, and you're dealing with all these other entities and relationships, and things can go great and you close, or things could not and you don't. But at the end of the day, the goal is to get to the very end and then get paid, right?
Right.
So there's a lot of energy. There's a lot of synergy. There's a lot of input and information. People bring with them to those exchanges and to those interactions and those relationships their deepest fear and their limiting beliefs. So if I'm working with somebody and they're like, oh, God, I know this escrow is going to, fall out and I really need the money, and their conversations, neuro-linguistic programming is the neurons in our brain through the linguistics and language that we use program our behaviors. So when people are talking to me or I'm working with somebody, they're setting themselves up to not get the deal, or they're fearful that the money's not going to come in because they have bills to pay, or they're like, oh, I'm counting on this one deal, or I just closed 3 great deals and now I don't have anything. So
right.
It's kind of like this mindset of the next deal. And what I want to share with people is if you look at the big picture of your business, you need to think and feel as an entrepreneur. You're not a realtor, you're not an agent. This is your business. This is a thought process that when you start to perceive yourself as a high-level producer in whatever it is you're selling or you're doing, your behaviors and thoughts and actions will start to change. And, it's so powerful that when I talk to people that want to make more money, Eric, and they want lavish and they want success,
right.
Their thoughts about it and their language are completely lackful.
Wow. Well, what do you do about that? How do you get beyond that?
I love that you asked me that.
Because it's so true. I deal with salespeople, and you're absolutely right. Their thoughts don't really reflect their actions,
right.
or their words don't really reflect their actions. And how does one, if they recognize that they're limiting themselves, if they recognize that they're stopping themselves by how they view themselves in the world, how do you fix that? I mean, that's some serious psychosis there.
It's perceived that way. It's not as serious as one might think. What it is understanding how to change states in your mind. So, for instance, we have 4 basic states that we go in and out of every day. We have beta, alpha, theta, and delta. There's 4, and you people have heard those terms before. Most people are trying to produce change in that 5 to 10% that I referred to earlier. They're consciously and logically trying to change, okay?
Okay.
So that's the conscious part. When we go into the second state of mind, which we all go into every day, the alpha state, alpha's like when we're driving and we're listening to music or we're reading or we get done eating and we're chilling with a friend. Our state of mind shifts all day, every day, in and out of fully conscious and aware to drifting, and maybe we're daydreaming about something as we're sitting at lunch. That's when we're in alpha, right? And then we drift into theta when we, go to lay down or take a nap. We're kind of drifty. Maybe we're kicking back in our car with our eyes closed for 10 minutes or something, and, a lot of people meditate or whatever. And then delta is where we go to sleep at night. So the importance of,